Today, we're going to talk about specifically immigration. And everything that we talk about today, these are the latest updates. This is stuff that is for sure. So we're not going to talk about anything that's going through Congress right now or anything that hasn't been passed. We're only going to talk about exactly what is enforceable at this current moment. And so this is the latest information that we have. And as you know, things are changing daily. New lawsuits are being filed to combat certain executive orders. So things are changing fairly rapidly, which is why we're going to do these on a quarterly basis, so that we bring us the latest updates to you guys as soon as we get them. Okay. So we're going to talk about immigration in the new administration. So the bad news is that the current status of certain immigration programs are up in the air. And you need to prepare yourself and your family for encounters with ICE, and figure out what you're going to do if you are detained, and also like certain efforts of community members with providing resources, classes, updates, sort of like we are here at Legal Aid Center, Southern Nevada. So as of right now, we don't have any evidence of any mass ICE raids here in Nevada, at least in the Las Vegas area. They seem to be doing more targeted enforcement. So this is going to be with people with criminal convictions, prior deportations, or current removal orders. So that's who they're prioritizing right now. However, through Trump administration's own data, 48% of the individuals detained as of right now have no violent criminal history or any criminal history at all. So, they're saying they're doing one thing, and then sometimes other people are what we call collateral damage. They're getting caught up in it. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of consistency in regards to it being only people with criminal convictions. But as of right now here in Las Vegas, there doesn't seem to be any targeted, any mass ICE raids. They're not showing up en masse and, arresting a bunch of people. It seems to be more of those targeted with criminal convictions and things like that. But that doesn't mean that it can't change or that you can't be detained. It just means that is the latest information we have in who they are targeting, which are people with, current deportation and removal orders or with a criminal history. Okay, so this is what the local law enforcement is saying. So Las Vegas Metro, they've announced that they're not going to participate in enforcing immigration violations. They're not going to stop, question, detain, arrest, or place an immigration hold on any individual on the grounds that they are undocumented immigrants. However, they will share information with ICE at the time of both booking and release if non-citizen is charged with crimes noted above. So if there are certain types of charges, then the LVMPD will report that to ICE, but they're not going to participate in any of the arresting or detaining at this point. Henderson Police has announced that they will alert ICE if an undocumented person is booked into their jail for any charge, but will not assist ICE or federal agencies with operations pertaining to deportations. So they will tell ICE if they arrest an undocumented immigrant and have any charge, but they're not going to participate in those deportation operations. And then North Las Vegas has not said anything. They have not issued any sort of statement saying whether they will assist or will not assist. And so at this point, we can only assume that they will until they tell us differently. So those are the stances of the three big local police agencies. So they're sort of following along with what the majority of police and law enforcement, at least state police and law enforcement, are saying, is that they're not going to be actively participating, but they will inform ICE. And generally, let's see here. So if for Las Vegas Metro and Henderson, they're going to alert ICE if a foreign-born individual is arrested and charged with a violent felony, domestic violence, and or driving under the influence. However, the new Lake and Riley Act that was just signed into law recently, it sort of lowers that standard. So it makes it so that any person without legal status who is arrested, detained, or charged with theft crimes, including petite larceny and an assault of a law enforcement officer, is subject to mandatory federal detention with no bond possible. So the Lake and Riley Act is going to cause a lot of problems because it doesn't require anyone be convicted of a crime. It just means that they have to be detained or charged with a crime. And it doesn't even have to be a violent crime. It can be, something small as a misdemeanor. And there's not a lot of due process in regards to this, or any at all. And it could result in prolonged detention. And there's not much that we know that we can do about it as of yet, except just we're going to give you some tips and tricks for how to deal with ICE when you encounter them to protect yourself. But the Lake and Riley Act is going to involve it will eventually involve people who may not have any major criminal history or even any convictions. We're just talking charges. And so the whole innocent until proven guilty sort of goes out the window with the Lake and Riley Act. So we're going to have to watch that very closely and make sure that it's not being abused, but it does kind of give much broader arrest power and deportation power to the federal government. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the current, who's in charge and about the different departments in regards to immigration. So the United States Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, controls the Department of Homeland Security. So she's a member of the U.S. Cabinet, and she reports to Donald Trump, the president. So the first one is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So this is USCIS. That's going to be the department that oversees most immigration services. So if you are filing any petitions, like an I-130 or a family petition, or to get your green card, or to adjust your status, or your TPS, all of that goes through USCIS. Then a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's ICE. Just think of them as the police. That's the Immigration Police Department. They're the ones that conduct the raids, that do the detentions, and do the deportations. And then U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, those are the officers that work on the border itself. And then the U.S. Coast Guard, they're going to be the ones that enforce, border crossings in the across like international waters and things like that. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is TPS, because we have a lot of people that are recipients of TPS. We've been working closely with individuals to renew their TPS recently, especially those individuals from El Salvador and Venezuela and other countries that are currently under the TPS, which is TPS is a legal status that allows people from certain countries to live and work in the United States for a limited time. The U.S. government grants TPS when it's unsafe for people to return to their home country. So as of right now, Venezuela's extension was revoked and designation was not renewed. So that it's going to affect about 300,000 individuals. So they've decided not to renew that. There are other countries that are going to be at risk as well. El Salvador is a big one. That may not come and be an issue, but as of right now, we're not going to speculate on any countries or certain TPS that's going to be revoked because we don't know. As of right now, Venezuela is the only one that seems to be at risk. But that temporary protective status is what a lot of people are here on, and they are able to have a work visa and are able to work legally in the United States. And as long as those extensions keep happening, they can remain here. But if you revoke, if the federal government decides to revoke that TPS, then it could cause a lot of issues down the road. But again, we won't know until they actually do it. And so as of right now, Venezuela are the only ones being affected. And that could change as well. That there could be lawsuits filed. There can be things that could happen that could fix that as well. So everything is kind of up in the air. But as far as we know, the only TPS that seems to be at risk is Venezuela. Also, there's some changes in the immigration court directives. So recently, prosecutorial discretion has been rescinded. So what that means is that judges and the Department of Homeland Security's counsel, which is their attorneys, they have discretion, or they did, to postpone or close a deportation case. That's been revoked. So the federal government has decided to take away that discretion. And so they're not going to be able to close or postpone any more of those deportation cases. It's going to be, I guess what they are trying to do is say that it's more efficient and that they're going to push all these removal proceedings through much quicker without that discretion. But it does put a lot more people at risk because the judges and the attorneys for the Department of Homeland Security, I mean, they were closing cases. If it wasn't something that didn't really fall under their priorities. But as of now, that discretion has been lifted. And so some of the people at risk, because of that discretion that's been rescinded, are people who are applying for U visas, which is victims of crime or domestic violence. VAWA, which is domestic violence, special immigrant juvenile visas. So that's for minors who don't have a guardian who are attempting to enter the United States. Trafficking victims, which is T visas, family petitions, and other things that are currently in process that could be affected, but as of right now don't seem to be, but they are at risk. So it's something that we're going to have to watch moving forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about preparation. So how to prepare yourself, how to prepare your families for if you are detained or deported. One of the ways that we're helping with that is Red Card. So I don't know if this is something you've heard of. It's pretty popular. It's sort of a small Know Your Rights card, and something you can hand to an ICE officer if you encounter them. And it sort of lays out your rights without having to say anything to the officer that has detained you. So if you have minor children, you may want to think about setting up a nomination of a guardian, and that way that if something happens and you're deported and someone needs to help take care of your children, then there is a document on file that says that who you would prefer to be the guardian of your children. 6-month temporary guardianships, that would be for now, versus the nomination of a guardian is for if you are detained or deported. But a 6-month temporary guardianship is something you would sign right now, and it would give 6-month temporary guardianship to another person. But that is not, it may not be necessary at this time, but that is something that you could do last minute. But just know that if you do a 6-month temporary guardianship, that's right now. So that's something you are doing currently and giving guardianship to someone else currently. Also, we have people who have questions about adoption. So like step-parent adoptions, especially if the step-parent is a United States citizen and their stepchild is not. They are like, well, if I adopt my stepchild, then that will make them an American citizen. You can't do that. Because if the child is a foreign-born individual, then they have to follow the Hague protocols, which are very complicated, and a lot of that is international law that you have to go through in order to finalize those adoptions. So a quick U.S. adoption is not going to protect the child or the parent who's also undocumented or an immigrant, because of the requirements that those adoptions go through the Hague, which are, again, it's a lot of a Hague adoption is very complicated. And then guardians, consider a petition to appoint a successor guardian now. So, if you're worried about the future of your children and you need assistance with that, the Family Law Self-Help Center has a lot of forms, guardianship forms that's online or in person at the family court over on Bonanza and Pecos. But you can also go online to the FamilyLawSelfHelpCenter.org, and they have all of the guardianship petitions. The nomination of a guardian can be found there as well. And so all of those forms you can find on there, and with explanations on what they are and how you can use them in case something happens where you're detained or you are deported. And then also, if you need someone to handle your finances here in the United States, if you are detained or deported, then you can do a financial power of attorney, which is that allows someone to act on your behalf if you are unable to do so. Another update that's happened recently is that the Sensitive Places Directive has been terminated. So before, ICE was prohibited from entering what they called sensitive places, which are schools, churches, hospitals, places of worship, things like that. But that policy was recently revoked. And I have heard that there are a few churches in a couple of states that are have already come out and said they will not be allowing ICE to enter their congregations. And that may be something that spreads amongst churches or other states. But as of right now, ICE can enter anywhere. They can come into schools, churches, hospitals, wherever they feel necessary to conduct raids. And so until we hear otherwise, we're going to assume that they can enter anywhere. However, they can't stop, question, or detain anyone without a proper warrant or probable cause to believe an individual is here illegally. And so we'll get to the part where when you interact with an ICE agent, what you should say. Because you do have rights to not say anything or to not, engage with them. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. So this is a little bit more for employers or people who are sort of like front of house or people who are working, kind of forward facing to the public. If ICE enters public areas, they cannot enter private areas without a proper judicial warrant. So it has to be signed by a judge. So if you're working and they enter a public area, you should not allow them to enter the private areas. So that could be, the kitchen or, the back of house or wherever you are. And you should immediately contact a supervisor who will meet with ICE and verify if ICE has a judicial warrant or not and can enter the private areas of the premises. You do not have to answer questions. You don't have to give names, and you don't have to present any identification. Okay. So these are some tips on what to do if you encounter an ICE agent. Or are being questioned or anything like that by ICE. So if ICE stops you, you have the right to remain silent. You do not have to answer questions regarding your immigration status, where you were born, or how you entered the United States. However, do not physically resist a government official and do not run away, because this could, again, trigger the Lake and Riley Act, which is if you are resisting arrest or not cooperating with an officer, then that could trigger, they could say that that is a crime in and of itself and arrest you for that. So do not run away and don't resist. But you don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to talk to them at all. If you do have any valid immigration documents on you, you can show them to the ICE officers, but you don't have to show them anything or tell them anything. If ICE comes to your home, you have the right to not open the door. You may remain silent and not answer any questions again. You have the right to refuse any official wishing to enter without a warrant. A warrant must be shown to you and must have your correct name and address on it. So be sure to ask to see that warrant and be firm about not allowing them entry into your home. If ICE takes you into custody, ask to speak to an attorney and do not sign any document that you do not understand. Even if ICE officers are persistent and want to pressure you, do not sign it. They cannot force you to sign it. Be sure not to sign it, because that can get you in serious trouble if it's some sort of confession or other type of document that could, sort of expedite your removal. We don't want that to happen. So do not sign anything you don't understand, and always request to speak to an attorney. You can also request to see an immigration judge, and then you can ask the judge for bail in order to be released. I believe the bail minimum at this point is set at $1,500, but it can go up much higher than that. You also have the right to request assistance from your country's consulate. So you can request to talk to someone at your consulate. And if you have minor children, let officers know that you are a parent or a primary caregiver, and ICE may exercise discretion and let you go. There's no foolproof guarantee, but these are some of the things that you can bring up to ICE agents if you are in detention, and hopefully they will help you in that situation. Okay, so protocols if detained. See. Most individuals who do not have a prior deportation, expedited removal, or are subject to a mandatory detention have the right to request an immigration hearing. If you're arrested and processed, ICE may release the individual under bond. And again, that minimum is $1,500, but it can go up from there. If no bond is set, the individual may request a bond hearing. Immigration judge will then review the request and either conduct the hearing or not. And then there will be a preliminary hearing to determine the bond amount, if any. And then there is also an individual hearing, which is the actual trial about the removal process itself. So for the latest up-to-date resources on all of this, and also digital copies of the red card, digital copies of Know Your Rights, lots of resources, community organizations that are holding Know Your Rights, classes and events. All of that stays up to date on our webpage, which is www.lacsn.org/US, and we update that I would say weekly, or just as we get new information, it gets updated.